It's very different now to what it was when I was swimming. When I was training, when I was competing back in the late 70s, early 80s, and even into the 90s, there wasn't a lot of support for swimmers. There wasn't a lot of support for people who wanted to follow that as a career. And now they have a lot more that they bring to the sport. They have camps, they have foundations, they have physios, they have dietitians. They were only starting really to look at doing that, and sports science was something that they were bringing into the sport when I was sort of coming to the end of my swimming career. It's now a very different sport, and there's a lot more financial input for the sport as well. Some of the top swimmers now get paid to be there and represent the country, whereas my mum and dad funded my entire swimming journey and swimming career, which is why I went into teaching, and that's what developed me as an instructor.
I'm really excited to welcome Angela Wilson to the show today. She's founder and CEO of Angela Swim School. She founded a national franchise following a successful international swimming career, and it's now helping thousands of families to learn to swim up and down the country. So welcome to the show, Angela.
Thank you.
Great to meet you. And I know normally what we do is start talking about people's early life for the listeners to get to know them a little bit better. And one of my questions is normally kind of your first sporting memory. But I think with yourself and your career in swimming and what you're doing now, it's probably those two things really closely linked in terms of how early did you start with swimming? I'm really curious on that. And then I think that's really going to take us into what you're doing now. So what age were you when you first started to swim?
Well, my mum was an international swimmer. So my mum took me to the swimming pool from a really early age. I don't actually remember having lessons because my mum spent so much time with me in the water and taught me to swim properly. And then from that, I actually started competing in competitions at 5 years of age.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was already quite a champion swimmer from a very early age.
So were you competing up an age group then, or were the 5-year-olds you competing against?
It was an open age group. It was under 10s. So I was competing against any child up to the age of 10 at age 5, and coming in second place, third place against 9 and 10-year-olds from a very early age.
Yeah, and I know it's pretty intense, I guess, swimming to compete. I guess how much work were you putting in at that stage, at early age of 5? And I guess was your mum still competing then? So was she always in the pool?
Yeah, my mum competed in the Masters World Games. So my mum was still training and she was teaching as well, swimming. And then between the two of us, we used to go to the pool pretty much every day. When I was 5, I was there every day after school. By the age of 7, I'd started early morning training. So I used to get up in the morning with my mum and we'd go to the pool and we would train with the club and the coach before school. Then I would have a whole day at school and then go back again to training after school. So my early childhood, right up into my late teens, literally was just spending all the time that I had swimming and training and competing.
Those hours in the 10,000 hours in the pool, right?
Something like that.
What was school like for you then, in terms of, obviously, from a sporting context and an active family context? Sounds like there's a big focus there. But outside of that, what was your experience at school and obviously as sport in school?
I was actually a very sporty child, and I loved doing other sports as well. I was into gymnastics until I was about 11, and I did running as well as a cross-country runner. I set all the records at school, believe it or not, in running as well. I broke all the school records, and I think I even hold records today for running as well as swimming at school all those years ago. So I was quite active in many different sports. I did hurdles. I loved hurdles. I was actually quite good at hurdles. And so swimming and other sports definitely were really good to be a part of at school. And it gave me a really all-round active experience.
Yeah, and I guess outside of like really strong role models in the home, did you have brothers and sisters, and was there kind of competitiveness between you two?
Absolutely. My mum and dad had 4 children. So my sister was only 2 years younger than me. And then I've got 2 younger brothers as well. All of us were very sporty. We're all interested in different sports. My brother played football. My sister was a runner. And my younger brother did gymnastics and rugby as well. But every one of us swam right up until our teenage years. Mum felt it was the most important sport for foundation helping us to be strong and fit and healthy in our heart and our lungs and our bodies, keeping them fit and flexible as well. So the swimming really was the foundation sport that all of us did to quite a high standard before we went on and chose our different paths, which obviously I decided to stay in swimming.
Swimming, yeah, and that's what I'm really curious about, that kind of what that looks like. I guess you continue to compete through school, age groups, etc. But what's the, or maybe it's different now, but what's the kind of pathway for a young athlete or young swimmer? Obviously for yourself, you're blessed to have your mum there and supporting and taking you to the pool and things like that. But what's the kind of the landscape and pathway for someone who wants to come through and be an international swimmer?
It's very different now to what it was when I was swimming. When I was training, when I was competing back in the late 70s, early 80s, and even into the 90s, there wasn't a lot of support for swimmers. There wasn't a lot of support for people who wanted to follow that as a career. And now they have a lot more that they bring to the sport. They have camps, they have foundations, they have physios, they have dietitians. They were only starting really to look at doing that, and sports science was something that they were bringing into the sport when I was sort of coming to the end of my swimming career. So it's now a very different sport, and there's a lot more financial input for the sport as well. Some of the top swimmers now get paid to be there and represent the country, whereas I literally funded, and my mum and dad funded my entire swimming journey and swimming career, which is why I went into teaching. And that's what developed me as an instructor, was because I had to find something that I could do that would supplement my income for
to fund your training, etc.
Fund my swimming, my training. Yeah.
And so I guess school-wise, did you stay on at college, and was it a case of you kind of gone into the
I was selected for the Olympic team at 15, and I was swimming times that were quite fast, and I was selected then for the British Olympic squad when I was 15 for Barcelona in 92. So I dropped out of school a little bit and focused purely then on swimming. I never really went back to school. I have GCSEs, but I never did A-levels or college. So after I left school, literally, I just went into teaching and coaching, and then developed my own swim school and business model from that.
Nice. And just touching on that, you mentioned the Olympics there and the GB setup, etc. Was that a case of kind of residentially? Did you have to move away? Was it kind of the Bisham Abbey or whatever it be, where you'd go and be like squad based for swimming, or was it just you got selected and you got to competition?
They didn't have that in my time. It was just a case of you just trained yourself, you worked hard, you were on the team, and if you got the opportunity to go, then the team would be supportive financially then. But up until that point, I had to do everything myself. All my training, all my organising, funding, everything. I had to do it myself. So I was training every day and working every day as well.
Wow. And obviously super successful career in terms of like world, European, Commonwealth, competing for the country across all those big competitions. And you mentioned the Olympics there in 92. Are you able to, I guess, give us go back to that time and let us know how that, what exactly? Obviously, you said you're selected, but how did it pan out for you there? Because I know there's a bit.
It didn't turn out as well as I would have hoped. I was selected for the team at 15 and spent the next 9 months competing and training for the Olympic Games. Unfortunately, the British team changed their qualifying rules, so I ended up not getting selected. I came second at the Olympic trials. I just missed out by a tenth of a second on going and competing for Great Britain in the Olympic Games. So it broke me.
I was going to say, it must have been really hard as if it was a 15, 16-year-old at that point.
Yeah, it broke me. It did. There's still a lot of scarring about that even now today. I still carry a lot of pain and upset from that time. And I think I've carried it all my life, to be honest, because I never understood why I didn't get to go, why I wasn't able to go and compete. Sharon Davis spoke out at the trials and said that what the British team were doing was devastating British swimming by not taking the top swimmers to compete in the games. Possibly, I can't say, but I may have got a medal. The times that I was doing were right up there with some of the best in the world. So I could have gone and competed for Great Britain and brought back a medal, but I never even got the opportunity to try.
Yeah, and like you say, I mean, I guess at that time as well, that had been life changing. Nowadays, we have a lot more Olympic champions and Olympic medalists. There's so many of them. I remember then, '92. I don't know if maybe had a handful of medals, didn't we? So if you were one of those, that would have been a life.
It was actually the worst Olympic Games on record for British swimming.
Yeah.
Was
so just what's the reason? So they do the selection 9 months before to say, is that kind of you in contention, and then at the trials, because obviously I was thinking about athletics, so like it's like top 3 or whatever, or you do the times. Was it a case of just like funding? Was it they could only afford to take so many, so they just said the top ones? Or
no, I think they literally wanted to take people who they thought would be medal winners. So they decided only to take the first 2 people who made the qualifying times that they set. So they set these qualifying times as being the 8th fastest times in the world at that time, and I came in 10th of a second of that. And because I didn't actually get the time, I didn't get to go and compete. Had I hit the wall first, I would have got automatic selection. Yeah. So, but they only changed those rules 4 weeks before the games.
Yeah, no one's prepared for it. I mean,
I was not prepared for it at all, not at all.
So I guess coming back from something like that at such a young age, what was it like? I know you said it kind of broke you at the time, but how did you bounce back from that? And was it a case that you continued to swim and just got back in and just did what you knew best, or how did you manage yourself through it?
I think just deciding that I wasn't ready to give up when I had spent 11 years of my life competing and training for the Olympics. I decided that I had another 4 years and I would go back and train and try to go to Atlanta in '96. So that was my thinking behind it. I wasn't a quitter. I've never given up on anything in my life. So I was very determined that I wasn't going to be a quitter there and then, that I would get back in, I would carry on training. I was young enough that I felt I could go on and do yet another Olympic Games and put myself through another 4 years of hard training to do that.
And I guess all those characteristics kind of set you in good stead for business as well. We're going to talk about kind of running that, but that resilience and that dedication for growing a business is always key. So during that period, you're competing. Then when was it that you got into teaching? Then, so obviously you're still probably too young to be a teacher at that point. But when did you start getting into teaching? And
well, I started teaching while I was still swimming and training. So I was about 14, 15 when I started helping my mum, who already was teaching then. And I used to go along with her and work alongside her, just helping and assisting her. And then I started teaching and coaching when I was probably about 16 and earning money, earning a living from it. And that was how I complemented my career as well, and was able to give back to the sport and help myself to keep training and keep doing what I needed to do in order to get to that next Olympic Games that I had my sights on.
Yeah. And how did it go from just teaching to, I guess, the business that we're going to talk about now? Was it a case of you thought, right, I want to go to the next level, I want to expand, I want to be a franchise, I want to grow, or was it kind of organic?
Yeah, it was organic. I was only a young girl when I was teaching. My career ended, my swimming career, my competitive career ended due to illness. I had glandular fever, and then at that point I had to retire early from the sport. So I felt the next step for me was to carry on giving back to the sport, teaching, coaching, and seeing young swimmers and athletes coming through. And I really enjoyed and got a lot of pleasure out of doing that. I never looked at it as a business. I never thought about running my own business at that time. It literally was something that came organically as I grew a following of people that I was teaching and coaching. They saw the difference in what I was doing, saw how quickly I got the results, and also how fantastic the children were swimming from the way that I was teaching them. And that was word of mouth, and people just started coming to me in the hundreds and then eventually in the thousands. So I ended up with a swim school, which became Angela's Swim School, because everyone kept saying, have you been to Angela? Have you been there? You know, go to Angela. She's the best. She's the one that will help you learn to swim. Look what she's done for my children. So it became something that people just named Angela Swim School. I didn't even choose the name, but it just became Angela Swim School, so everyone knew me as Angela Swim School. And that was really where the business developed and started from.
So at the start, were you, because obviously now we talk about learning to swim, but were you coaching like budding competitive swimmers when you first started out, and was it like more of the club environment versus what you do now?
No, it was completely teaching. It was from the babies right through up till sort of club level. Then I would put them into swimming clubs. I still do that now. I don't enjoy the coaching side of it I prefer the development. I enjoy teaching the children and getting them to that level and then putting them in to a swimming club. I do have an awful lot of swimming club children come back. Highly competitive people come to me to help them with their technique and give them pointers and developing that as well. So I did that to help a lot of children and a lot of swimmers. But my main focus was on taking them from babies and getting them to a competitive level. And that's what I did. And I've seen hundreds of the children that I've taught go on to compete in different sports, most of them in swimming, and reaching really high standards themselves. So it's been very rewarding the last 25 years.
I bet. And in terms of there's a gap there, right? So there's the launch of it and there's the start, and you had the following and the kind of the branding as well, self-branding, and people was talking about is Angela Swim School. What did it take, or I guess what were the steps? How did you go from where you were then to now being kind of franchised? Process, procedures, everything's in place, and it's established, mature business. What were the kind of steps that you had to take initially to get going?
Well, I was teaching, as I said, for about 8 or 9 years, and then people sort of started talking about me as Angela Swim School. So then I decided that I would actually call it a business, make it a business name that people recognize, that I just wasn't an instructor that people were bringing their children to. I actually called it Angela Swim School, established it as a business name in 2001. And then for about the next 10 years, I carried on teaching and coaching, but I wanted to have a family as well. So my husband and I wanted to have children. We got married, or I got married to my husband. So it was a case of, how do I run a swim school, continue to do this, and be a mum at the same time, which is what I really wanted to do. So I started training people to teach my methods and to come in and help me, so that when I wasn't physically at the pool and I wasn't the one delivering the lessons, then I would have people there that could teach for me, and I could continue to run a business. And this worked really well. I took on more areas, more venues, and started to grow a following in different locations. And the business model just grew and grew to a point where I thought, I can't manage this. It's now too big for me to just, even with the instructors that I had, with all the people, and it was growing and spreading geographically as well. I looked at different options, and franchising for me was the option that I decided to go with. So we looked at a franchise model with through the bank, created that, and it took about a year to build that and to build that model so that we could then franchise the swim school. And I franchised it in 2014.
Nice. And then at that point, did you, I guess, some of your initial or your early staff, did any of those guys take on your first franchise, or was it just someone that you'd never met before?
No, my very first franchisee was actually, and is still my franchisee, was a girl that I taught and coached. She was one of the girls that came to me for coaching for her swimming and development when she was about 9 or 10 years old. And
Wow.
then I took her on as an instructor. I trained her up, and she was actually the first person that I felt would make a really good franchisee. And I took her on as my franchisee. So she was the first one that actually started. Two of the other franchisees were people that had worked in the swim school in other parts of the business, one in admin and another one as an instructor. So it was, to start with, an organic growth. And then we started doing franchise shows, and I attracted another 4 or 5 franchisees from the shows. So it worked really well, and the model developed and grew very quickly in the early days.
Yeah, and then I guess from outside that, a couple of questions from my point of view, I guess more operational. What's your kind of ideal profile? If you're looking for a franchisee, what is it that you kind of always look for, or that, and I guess with benefit of experience now, whether they're going to be a good fit or whether they're going to be successful themselves. What are those characteristics you look for?
I think the first thing I look for, depending on the person, is that there's someone I can work with. There's someone that I can see myself having a relationship with, because we're going to be spending a lot of time together as they grow the business. So that's really important to me, that there's someone I can develop and build a relationship with. The second thing that I'm looking for is someone who's as passionate about what I'm trying to achieve as I am. And then the third thing, I would expect them to have some form of business acumen, that they could be able to help and grow and run a successful business, as well as having a passion for growing and helping children and adults learn to swim.
Nice. And I know we're probably going to say, you probably say COVID, but I mean, COVID aside, what are the biggest challenges that you faced growing the network? Things that, and maybe they're reoccurring, or maybe they just come up as one-offs. But what would you say they are?
Well, I think when the lockdowns happened, that really put a threat not just on my business but on the industry itself. So it's been a very difficult time over the last 2.5 years to find a way of recovering from that. And I think a lot of businesses are still not recovered, and so many lost their business, their swim schools during that time. And it was really quite a shame. And even pools have closed and shut down. And now we've got the issue with the energy. We've got pools closing down as well. Not ours. We teach in school pools, but leisure centres can't afford the heating bills. So there's going to be different challenges over the next few years, I'm sure. But I
Because
feel
I'm thinking that might be challenging. Would that be a challenge for your growth? Obviously, I'm sure there's plenty of people who want a franchise, who want to buy a franchise from you. But in terms of finding those, if the number of pools are reducing or closing, etc., finding the right home for the classes and the franchise, is that a big challenge right now?
no, not necessarily. It's going to be more that the leisure centres, I think, won't be able to afford to keep a lot of their pools running, but the schools rely on the income. So the school pools that we use, they rely on that income from the swimming lessons. So that helps them to fund their pool and their heating costs, and they need that income. So I don't think there'll be a problem. And I do think there's actually going to be a huge influx of growth into private swimming schools, because the leisure pools are closing.
It's probably a good time to, and obviously we touched on it, and we know the kind of overview, but to look at exactly what the kind of offer is from Angela's Swim School. So in terms of who you're working with, and you said babies initially, you start at babies and go up. Is that right? Or have I kind of got it correct?
We take children from 4 months, and we teach them right through till teenage years. And then if they want to stay with us, we give them opportunities to learn how to be lifeguards, and then go on to be instructors. We do life saving with them as well. And then we also, if they have talent, we encourage them to pursue a career or an opportunity in swimming. We've actually got one young lady at the moment who is winning medals right, left, and centre. She's only 9 years old, and already she is proving to be a real talent for us as a swimmer.
No, it's good. It's good to have that exit route. And obviously for parents as well, they might not know the club scene as well as you do, and to have that kind of almost like satellite operation where you're feeding them into the club is great. What's your kind of vision if you're looking at like next 3 years, 5 years? Obviously talks about those challenges with the energy bills, etc., and kind of managing that. But your model not affected as you're working with the schools. What's your kind of growth plans over the next few years, and where you want to get into? Is there another kind of sector or different types of programs, or what's the plan?
Well, I developed my own model over the last 10 years. While I was franchising, I've also been working on my own model. So I have a badge program, and I have an animated led character program to give children understanding of how to learn to swim properly, and also giving them encouragement to develop their skills, and also to give them confidence in other areas of their lives, and teaching them self-discipline, teaching them self-reliance through learning to swim. And the characters talk them through and work with them on a journey. In the new year, I'm looking at launching that into a integrated program that we're launching as well, that will help for the children to understand more about the characters. So the program itself, I want to see as a way of children learning to swim properly and gaining the benefits of what swimming can actually do for them in terms of their health, their mental health, their physical health, and learning all that along the journey with the characters, who are the swim stylers that I named them. I developed the model with CHF Media, which is a company that develops children's television programs. So we work together to bring the characters to life, which for me is really exciting, and I can't wait for them to be launched properly next year. And then eventually we want to look at an international program for these characters and hope to take them nationally and internationally.
Awesome. So yeah, in terms of it sounds like maybe, I don't know, children's TV or Netflix show or something coming along the line. So that sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
We always, and you mentioned it there when you're talking about in terms of the benefits that swimming can bring outside of obviously physical. Is there anything? I'm assuming you're still a really active swimmer, but is there anything we always ask our kind of leaders on the show? What it is that they tap into to try and help them with their own performance, or kind of staying on top form and dealing with all of the stresses and challenges of work and life and everything. Is there anything that you tend to do, any habits that you do every day that you always keep you kind of grounded and centered?
I think on my own personal, for me personally, I read my Bible every day. That's where I get my strength from. That's what keeps my mind sane and helps to give me encouragement each day. And I find that gives me what I need to get me through and to learn and to deal with the challenges that I face every day. Business is always changing, business is always difficult, but life is always changing and life is always difficult. And I think trying to be successful in anything that you're doing in life, it's learning that you can't do it on your own, and that you need to rely on something or someone to help you get through. And I've found that that's been my greatest source of encouragement and also stability, to be able to help me to keep going each day.
Yeah, I love that. In terms of, I guess, business philosophies and things like that, is there anything where you've obviously decades in growing the company and seen it all at this stage? Is there anything that you've kind of brought together in terms of your leadership style that you always think, well, this is my approach, and I've kind of, this is just like you got your model for swimming, is a kind of Angela's model for leading a business and growing one?
I think just being kind to everybody, and to giving positive feedback even in times of negativity, because there's always ways that you can deal with things, and finding ways of making sure that even if you're delivering negative news or bad news, to try and make that more positive. And that's what I've tried to do throughout my journey with my business, and that's what I've tried to do with my own journey through life as well. Negativity is something that you have to try and train your mind not to be consumed by it. and it's very important to try and keep your mind as positive as you can. So keeping physically healthy, mentally healthy, emotionally healthy. I find swimming has been a great source of help for me. So I try to swim at least 3-4 times a week. And I find my own mind and my own health is a lot better when I swim. So it's a tonic I use for my own health as well. And through the business, I try and encourage each of the people that are in the business to do the same thing. And I feel that's been the thing that's helped me the most.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just curious in terms of like the number of swimmers and obviously life skill for children, etc. Do you get many, or do you do adult swimming lessons? Did you get many kind of, I guess, families coming up as well? I'm one, like I can swim, I'm not the greatest swimmer, but I watch my kids learn to swim, and I'm always kind of encouraged to think, oh, maybe I should get some lessons to get my technique sorted out and stuff. Is that like a trend that you see at all, or do you actually cater for adults as well?
Yeah, I think it's really lovely actually. We get a lot of families coming for lessons and swimming at the same time. The way that we manage our swimming lessons is that we do lessons for everybody together coming. So we find that we get parents coming and they're swimming at the same time as their children. So they learn to swim together, which is really lovely, really nice.
Yeah, and I like the way you put those sessions on, because it can be difficult, right? If you've got different age children and you're trying to balance it all and say, oh, this an hour gap between the two lessons or whatever it be. So, no, that sounds great. I've got just a kind of reflective question that we always ask all of our guests. It's the last one for me is if you could go back in time and speak to yourself as a younger person, when you're starting out in your career, or maybe just as you leaving school or whatever, is there one piece of advice you'd go back prior to starting the business, go back and give to your younger self?
I think probably not to be so disappointed by the disappointments. And I think that probably is the most important thing that I would tell myself, because the disappointments can make us feel heartbroken and sometimes that we want to give up and not keep going. But in actual fact, they're not as bad once you're through them as you would expect them to be. At the time, they feel like the worst thing in the world, but in actual fact, once you keep going and you realize that life is full of disappointments, but it's also full of opportunities as well that come from those disappointments, and that they are not as bad as you may first think.
Yeah, and it's sort of like, you're right, totally. What you're saying before about kind of your mindset as well. It's like, can you take the lesson from it and be thankful for I guess for the disappointment to make you a better person moving forward and stuff. So no, love that sentiment. Angela, I really appreciate your time, and thank you for being so transparent with us and coming on the show. We'll link everything in the show notes, and then anyone's out there who's looking for opportunities in swimming, I'm sure they'll be all reaching out to you.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Angela.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.